into a 3D view that we will then use. The sensor to adjustment is, think about how human eyes, we first need to see something and then we track them. So the sensor to adjustment is you've identified an important actor and how you follow that actor. And the bottom part called remix is what we call remainder activation. Because in the real world, the challenge is not only you see the cars and vehicles and bicyclists, this is what we call actors, but there are all kinds of weird things. You can have a mattress in the road, you can have a tumbleweed blowing into front of your truck, you can have a small animal suddenly coming out of nowhere. So this is where we use what we call a remainder explainer to understand the rest of the world. And all of them is stored in what we call the object persistence engine. So this is how a roughly looks like. And I'm going to skip the next set of discussion is essentially, let me go to the one summary chart. It's quite complicated. So this is actually a summary view of how our sensor to tensor mechanism works. So you have inputs from LiDAR, radar, camera, and we translate them into different views. So the top one is what we call the Euclidean tensor view. So essentially, this is a 3D view of the world. Then there is the range view, meaning I look at the distance and range. And last is the image view, that's your camera view. So we go through a set of neural network that is based on deep learning, designed for specific focus tasks, to essentially fuse some of these views together into, on the top is the Euclidean view, on the lower part is the range view. Then we go through another set of analysis, what we call the Euclidean ray scatter engine, to fuse this further together to the middle part that is also a set of Euclidean tensor view. And then we have yet another set of deep learning algorithms to use those views and compose a true 3D view of the world. So this is a very abbreviated view of how this happens, but it's based on a lot of complicated machine learning technology. And so, so this is yet another visual views of through the power of those multimodal sensing. This is actually a real test that we run in Texas among really heavy rain. And this is how well the truck can see everything around us when it's even not visible to human eyes. Because when you're driving in those conditions at 70 miles per hour in the big Cybertruck, that is what we rely on to make the best decision. Let me go to the next part is what we call motion planning. And motion planning is how you plan what you do next. So the interesting thing about motion planning is about forecasting. It's not only you see the world in a static fashion, but forecast what other people are going to do, because that impacts how you plan. So let me go again to a real examples of how we actually plan. So this is the examples of showing how we predict the possibilities of the different actors going to which lane. So the vertical axis is, those numbers are actors, things like cars and trucks we already identified. And the horizontal axis shows, are they going to come to the left lane? The eagle lane is where my AV is at, or the merge lane, because this is a scenario where it's merged. So if I play this video, so we're going to compute the probability of the actors in the left lane, in my lane, that's the eagle lane, and in the merge lane, you can see those numbers change. But as we start to drive, obviously things could be unpredictable. See that white car. That is, typically, when we swear, when we see somebody do that they were cutting through multiple lanes of highway and getting in front of me. So if we zoom in to how we're computing, we were initially assuming they're going to stay in the merge lane. But the quick lane, we predict them they're going to get into front of my lane, and then they cut over to the left. Obviously, on the real road, there is not just that one car. There are many, many cars. So we actually have this analysis essentially for all the actors that's in the world and we can actually predict what they're going to do next, so that can inform how we're going to plan our trajectory. I'm running through this fairly fast. Let me go through the next topic around simulation. Being in a safety critical business, you can't really rely always on real testing to simulate, to understand how the vehicle is going to perform in all the different scenarios. And also to take an autonomous car to drive is a very expensive activity. So we do believe, if you code and learn and drive, this is a very slow cycle of development. So instead, we do rely on driving to tell us how our trucks are doing, but we rely on a huge amount of simulation. And this is examples of how much simulation we run. At any given day, we probably run about 5 minutes simulations, from our developers. So this is a huge part of how we do development. So let me show examples of what this looks like. So I was talking to Emily, how she felt about this. This is actually a simulated world. So this is not your sims. This is really extremely high fidelity simulation. And you can see the reflection on the truck. This is just how we actually can see it. You can see the shadows on the road. It's just a lot of detail that is really important for us to perceive the world. It's going to be accurately captured in this. And even there is a driver, a human on the side. This person doesn't look like a robot. He looks like a real person. So this is what world-class simulation looks like. We don't actually hire gamers to build our simulation from a perception. We have a lot of the really amazing people from Pixar that really know how to construct the real-world scenario. So the entire video you see here is 100% simulated. Okay, so and the importance of simulation is also what happens in the real world. It's important for us to understand the tricky and difficult circumstance. Let's say when you see a debris on the side of the road, when you drive, unfortunately, you don't see that. You could be driving hundreds of miles without seeing that. But once we see something, we want to be able to use that as an example to expand our test set. So we understand all kinds of challenges. Suppose we see some debris on the road, how the car is going to handle. The other example around the real world is the scenery constantly change. Even on the same road, sometimes there's no vegetation, but then during certain seasons, the vegetation grows. And so again, simulation allows us to consider all these different variations. And especially interesting like this, a small child come out of a parked car and run in front of the truck. This is not something you want to test on real road. And this is also something you don't run into in real road all the time. So through simulation, we're able to expand the power of our test suite so that we can think about all these different and challenging circumstances that don't happen normally. Okay, so last but not least, I want to share this one thing. As part of the learning of the autonomous vehicles, you can learn about everything. Sometimes you do need to phone a friend. This is what we call chat assist. I know some of the younger crowd here may be just getting your driver's license. So chat assist is not your parents sitting there telling you, don't do this, don't do that. Or in my case, it's my spouse, often tell me, do this and not do this. Chat assist is something that is actually controlled by the autonomous driver itself. So this is when you decide, okay, I've seen a different type of construction, a different traffic sign that I cannot interpret, I've never seen, or someone directing traffic in a way I cannot understand. This is when you ask an explicit question to your chat assist operator, and they give you an explicit action. But the true importance of chat assist is chat assist only gives you information, but it never drives the car. Because as you can see, when something goes across the wire, you may not always get a person respond to you in the time you want to respond. So, or you may not have the reliable network connection. So at any given point, the driver, in this case, the autonomous driver, is controlling the safety of the car, where Chinese assist is providing some additional information to get you unstuck. Because if you cannot interpret a traffic sign, you may choose to pull over to the shoulder. And the Chinese assist will tell you, yeah, that's safe to go through, or maybe this is a different type of speed limit or lane interpretation that then you can proceed with your autonomous journey. So, I've covered a lot of ground really quickly. So this is another video showing, I've shown some of the trucking video. This is what autonomous robo-taxi looks like. This is a demo we just did with Toyota in Texas a few weeks ago. And this is the Aurora driver-powered Siennas running on Texas highway. So it's actually a pretty freaking experience when you travel on a highway in 70 miles per hour, fully autonomously. I got to experience that in a big truck. I got to experience that in a passenger car. So this is just going through the surface street near the Toyota headquarters, but eventually this is heading to the highway. And so with that, let me conclude my talk. I've gone through a lot of really deep content, but what I'm fundamentally excited about the future of autonomous driving is this seems to be a pursuit of at least my generation. I think it's finally becoming a reality in a very short, foreseeable future. And I want to thank all of you to show interest in this important subject. And I'd love to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our first question is, what made you move into self-driving tech?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have worked in cloud computing for a long, long time, actually for more than a decade. And cloud computing is a more established field. And I was having lots of fun at Google. So I didn't really plan to come to autonomous driving. And when I talked to the founder of Aurora, we've talked for several months. Even when he decided to hire me, I said, no, I'm not making this change. But it's through some conversations with friends and also personal reflection, I really recognized when I was working in cloud, despite this being a really important business and set of capabilities, it's just not very tangible. And when I work for autonomous driving, you feel a strong sense of mission. You feel a strong sense of this tangible output. So for example, last year we were trying to teach the truck to do new tricks. You can often, through the power of software, get the truck to do different things it cannot do the night before. It's just so satisfying to see how that happens. Obviously the promise of self-driving is also endless in terms of the benefit. So yeah, I feel this is the time I'm truly working with a mission. And I have to say it's been one of the best decisions I've got to make.
Awesome. And how does the vehicle deal with bad weather such as fog and snow?
That is a great question. Fog and snow and bad weather remains as one of the most challenging part of autonomous driving. And this is why you see everybody is driving Arizona and Texas, because there is more driving weather over there and also more open road. So in terms of fog and snow, for fog and snow, there is a big part of that is through perception. And this is where we do believe through the multimodal sensing, it will allow us to see better. And then there is a second element of control, because that's the difficult thing with snow especially. So, so this is also areas of focus. I'm not saying that, yeah, we're going to see those are the things we address probably on the longer time horizon, but I do believe there is a lot of interesting technology development that allows us to to make substantial progress.
Are efforts in expanding public transportation and developing self-driving cars in conflict with each other, or how can they work together?
That is a great question, and thank you for asking that. We do believe, self-driving is a big part of enabling people mobility better and potentially enabling better transportation and more efficient transportation. So if you look at all the people working on autonomous cars, most people's first use case is robo-taxi as opposed to private cars. Because first of all, there is a huge cost factor from the initial cost of the fully autonomous car. But from a use case point of view, there is definitely more commercial opportunity from a public transportation point of view than private passenger car. So I do think, and from a trucking side of things, it's not only we're dealing with trucking driver shortage, but this is also making things move faster. A human driver, legally and physically, you can drive about 10 hours a day. And you need to go to the rest stop. Autonomous drivers don't. The only place you need to go might be a few stops. So if you think about with autonomy, you can essentially enable 23-hour, 24-hour non-stop driving. So that's going to allow us to move goods much, much faster. So there's a lot of potentials of unlocking different use cases with autonomous driving.
Well, we covered last two questions, but will the car still have a steering wheel / someplace for a human driver to put an input, or will it totally be self-driving?
That is also a great question. I think for our testing cars and trucks, there are steering wheels because we still have a human driver inside what we call the safety driver. So think about during the development, let's say this 11-hour trip I went on, there's a few cases where the human driver did take over. For example, we were passing a border patrol station, and when the border patrol officer sees this onlooking thing, he was very confused about what we were doing, and then he decided to ask the question, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" That turned out to be his real question. But there's still cases like this. Autonomous driving does not yet know how to handle yet. So we always have a safety driver in the car and the truck. But when we launch the product, Aura is aiming to launch our first product in the next by the end of next year. So it's really less than 2 years away. We're not going to be having a driver in the truck. The initial version still have steering wheel and all the things you have in the car to handle where we don't know how to drive yet. Let's say driving through a border patrol or certain cases. But in the distant future, those things will be removed when we get to what we call full autonomous, when we have level 5, where a car and truck can handle any circumstance. So the answer is no, we don't need those anymore, but for now, we still have them.
Okay, I think we've reached the final time limit, but put your hands together one more time for Dr. Yanbing.
Thank you, everyone.